This is Packet A of the 2021 ACF Regionals. These are the bonuses. 1. In this novel, two characters notice that a billboard for modern bread has been replaced by a picture of the Prime Minister, for 10 points each. Name this novel in which Dina Dalal forges an inseparable relationship with the Darji tailors and her tenant Manek Kola amid the turmoil of the emergency. The answer is A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry. B. In this other novel, the magician's ghetto of Picture Singh is destroyed as part of the emergency's policies. Salim Sinai is forced to undergo a vasectomy by emergency officials in this Salman Rushdie novel. The answer is Midnight's Children. C. After visiting India during the emergency, this author wrote the second book in his Indian trilogy. The Pundit Jairam harasses the protagonist of another of his novels, who was born in the wrong way and with 6 fingers. That is V.S. Naipaul. Bonus 2. Shibata Sesshin, who is known as the master of this material, developed a method for painting with it known as urushi-e, for 10 points each. Name this material that is imitated with a glossy black varnish on wood in the European technique of japanning. A sword pommel motif was often carved into Japanese chideo, made with red and black layers of this material. The answer is lacquer. B. Gold powder is mixed with lacquer and then applied to cracks in this technique, which is informed by the aesthetic principle of wabi-sabi in repairing broken pottery while embracing flaws. That answer is kintsugi. C. In addition to pottery, Japanese lacquer was most often applied to this material. Ukiyo-e were created by making prints using carved blocks of this material. That answer is wood. Bonus 3. This leader successfully contained a smallpox epidemic while serving as regent for her brother, the Merry Monarch, while he was on a world tour, for 10 points each. Name this monarch who opposed the Reciprocity Treaty and led the Stand Firm movement. That is Queen Liliuokalani. B. This country's last monarch, Liliuokalani, was overthrown in a coup that replaced its kingdom with an American-supported republic of the same name. That is Hawaii. C. After reading the Blount Report, Grover Cleveland urged the Senate to restore the Queen and asked this only president of the republic to resign. This man refused to do so, remaining president until annexation. That answer is Sanford Dole. Bonus 4. Answer the following about the chemistry of umami flavor, for 10 points each. A. The savory flavor of umami is most commonly produced by this non-essential amino acid, present in foods like cheese and soy sauce. It is provided along with fat and salt in bouillon cubes. That answer is glutamic acid. B. Umami flavor is only produced by L-glutamate, which bears this relationship to the inactive D-glutamate. Enantiomers are chiral, non-superposable pairs of structures that have this relation to one another. That answer is mirror images, except reflections. C. Umami can also be derived from this nucleotide that contains a hypoxanthine unit. This purine derivative, often found in the first anticodon site of tRNAs, is a precursor in the biosynthesis of adenosine and guanosine. That answer is inosinic acid or inosinate. Bonus 5. In the story My Chivalric Fiasco, A worker at one of these places is promoted after witnessing his boss's rape of a co-worker, but reveals the crime while on the drug Nightlife, for 10 points each. Name this type of place. In another story, the psychotic veteran Samuel is hired to defend one of these places amid a rising gang violence, but ends up killing the protagonist. The answer is theme park or amusement park. B. In the latter story by George Saunders, the theme park that is in bad decline reenacts events from this war. Ambrose Bierce's experience in this war inspired stories like An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. That answer is the American Civil War. C. A boy named Ambrose visits a Maryland amusement park with his family in this author's highly metafictional story, Lost in the Funhouse. That answer is John Barth. Bonus 6. In a 1993 essay collected in Medieval Queenship, Janet Nelson examined the monstrous regiment of women that surrounded this non-Scottish ruler, for 10 points each. A. Name this ruler. In her book, King and Emperor, Nelson examines the context behind this ruler's crowning as the first Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD. That answer is Charlemagne. B. One of the women discussed in Nelson's essay is this mother of Charlemagne, who orchestrated his marriage to Desiderata of Lombardy. She also negotiated peace between Charlemagne and his brother Carloman I. That answer is Bertrada, or Bertha Broadfoot. C. Though it portrays Bertrada in a positive light, this historian paints Charlemagne's third wife, Festrada, as a cruel queen. This historian chronicled the Frankish court in his Vita Caroli Magni. That answer is Einhard. Bonus 7. Mozart's 4 concerti for this instrument were written for his friend Joseph Leutgeb, for 10 points each. A. Name this middle register brass instrument with coiled tubing. Players of this instrument often place a hand inside its flared bell. The answer is French horn. B. In a threatening march within the first movement of this symphony, horns play in bass clef down to a low concert E flat. Near the end of this work, violins repeat a high A more than 100 times. That answer is Symphony No. 5 in D minor by Dmitri Shostakovich, or Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony. C. In the scherzo of this composer's Fifth Symphony, a horn soloist plays with the instrument's bell facing up. That symphony in C sharp by this composer also includes an adagietto, slow movement for strings and harp. That is Gustav Mahler. Bonus 8. They're not Amazons, but Michael Spadel identifies Freydis, daughter of Eric the Red, as one of these figures because she fought bare-breasted and terrified her enemies, for 10 points. A. Give these warriors who, according to Saxo Grammaticus, swallowed fiery coals in an apparent invulnerability to fire. Several rooks from the Lewis chessmen are identified with these figures because they bite their shields. The answer is berserkers. B. Freydis was a shield maiden, like these female warriors who chose heroes to take to Valhalla. Odin placed one of these figures, Brunhild, in a ring of fire. That answer is Valkyries. C. This deity names a cursed object that the shield maiden Hervor takes from her berserker father's barrow. This god is the only one among the Aesir not to laugh during an event that takes place on the island Lyngvi. That answer is Tier. Bonus 9. Increased progesterone production during the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle leads to an increase in this quantity, for 10 points each. Name this quantity. A fertility awareness method for natural birth control predicts fertility by combining observations of this physiological quantity with observations of cervical fluid. The answer is basal body temperature. B. This process that results from surges in LH and FSH leads to slight increases in basal body temperature. This product may be accompanied by a type of pain called Mittelschmerz. This answer is ovulation. C. Small fluctuations in peripheral body temperature can bring on hot flashes caused by this process, which occurs as the ovaries stop producing estrogen and progesterone. During this event, menstruation permanently ends. The answer is menopause. Bonus 10. Santiago Ramon y Cajal made many pen and ink drawings of what he called arborizations within these larger objects, which are collected in the book Beautiful This Object, for 10 points each. A. Name these objects. The architect Christopher Wren provided engravings for a Thomas Willis book that first illustrated these objects. The answer is brains. B. This polymath performed many dissections in order to create medical illustrations like Vitruvian Man. That is Da Vinci. C. Vesalius illustrated flayed corpses in dramatic poses in De Humani Corporis Fabrica, which disproved many assertions by this physician. This physician popularized Hippocrates' theory of the humors. That is Galen. Bonus 11. Along with Sayyid Ali Akbar, this figure petitioned Mirza Shirazi to support a national boycott of tobacco, for 10 points each. Name this Shiite scholar who envisioned a united Islamic civilization to combat European imperialism in his Refutation of the Materialists. With Mirza Reza Kermani, this man planned the assassination of Shah Nasser al-Din. That answer is Jamal al-Din al-Afghani. Al-Afghani is underlined. B. Some sources claim that al-Afghani served as ambassador to this empire to gather support and money for Azam Khan. This empire had earlier signed the Treaty of Gulistan with Persia. That is Russia. C. Al-Afghani was influenced to write Refutation of the Materialists after witnessing this 1857 conflict in India, named after the soldiers who refused to use Enfield rifles. That answer is the Sepoy Mutiny. Bonus 12. In a play set 20 years after Jaroslav Hasek's novel, the soldier Yosef Shevek gets lost in a snowstorm and meets this man, who performs a wild dance of desperate thrusts, for 10 points each. Name this man who is allegorized as a Chicago mobster who aims to take over the Cauliflower Trust in a parable play titled The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui. That is Hitler. B. While in exile during Hitler's regime, this German author of The Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui wrote pioneering epic theater plays like Mother Courage and Her Children. That answer is Bertolt Brecht. C. This actress, Brecht's second wife, starred in his play Fear and Misery of the Third Reich. She also co-founded the Berliner Ensemble with Brecht and premiered the role of Mother Courage. That is Helena Weigel. Bonus 13. These materials are described by a Hubbard model near half filling, for which the on-site repulsion is much larger than the hopping integral. For 10 points each, name these materials that would be expected to be conductors in simple band theory, but are not, thanks to strong electron-electron repulsions. Nickel 2 oxide is a textbook example of these materials. That is Mott insulators. B. The Mott metal transition occurs when this quantity raised to the negative 1/3 power is equal to roughly 4 times the Bohr radius. The Hall coefficient equals 1 over the product of this quantity and the electron charge. That answer is carrier density or carrier concentration. C. The Hubbard model also describes materials named for having heavy examples of these particles in their unfilled f orbitals. This broad class of particles all have half-integer spin, unlike bosons. That answer is fermions. Bonus 14. Answer the following about postmodern architects' use of verbal and architectural quotations for 10 points each. Robert Venturi stated this four-word quip in the book Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture. This phrase plays off another architect's maxim in extolling minimalism. That answer is less is a bore. B. Philip Johnson's design for 550 Madison Avenue has an ornamented open pediment that has been compared to the work of Thomas Chippendale, an 18th century English artisan who made this general class of objects. That answer is furniture. C. Michael Graves' controversial design for the Portland building incorporates many elements from this geometrical style of architecture popular in the 1920s, which was used in skyscrapers like the Chrysler Building. That answer is Art Deco. Bonus 15. The professional quality of life scale measures this phenomenon often found in trauma workers, oncology nurses, and palliative care specialists for 10 points each. A. Name this form of secondary traumatic stress that is increasingly affecting medical professionals as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This acute burnout, only found in caregivers, can result in apathy or loss of empathy. That answer is compassion fatigue. B. Compassion fatigue is common in professions like healthcare that heavily demand this kind of work. Arlie Hochschild coined the name for this type of work. That answer is emotional labor. C. Guy and Newman argued that this economic phenomenon emerges because most stereotypically female professions require emotional labor, but companies do not compensate for it like they do other forms of labor. That answer is the wage gap. Bonus 16. Eugenio Montal called this author a poet in C major and translated his poem When You're Old, which was itself based on a poem by Pierre Ronsard, for 10 points each. Name this author whose play, The Countess Kathleen, was dedicated to Maud Gonne and translated into Italian by Niccolo Vidakovich. This author drew on Japanese no theater in plays like At the Hawk's Well. That is Yeats. B. Bishnu Day, an author in this language, labeled Yeats as the poet of the universe and translated 18 of his poems. Yeats championed Rabindranath Tagore, a major poet of this language's namesake Renaissance. The answer is Bengali. C. A modernist poet from this country translated Yeats' poem, The Cloths of Heaven, which says, "Tread softly because you tread on my dreams." Another poet from this country wrote, "Tread softly, deeply, and go in azaleas." That answer is Korea. Toss-up 17. This Hebrew word is also called the Tetragrammaton, for 10 points each. Identify this word used as a name for God in the text of the Torah. A Christian denomination known for door-to-door proselytizing is named for this word's witnesses. The answer is Jehovah. B. When reading the Torah, Jews say this word in Hebrew in place of YHWH. In the King James Bible, the English version of this word is written in all capital letters. You may give the answer in English or Hebrew. The answer is Adonai or Lord. C. The Jahwist and Elohist sources, named for their contrasting words for God, are part of this four-source theory for the origin of the Hebrew Bible. This hypothesis was popularized by Julius Wellhausen in the late 1800s. The answer is documentary hypothesis. Bonus 18. Several cultures built pyramids, but many more built tumuli, or earthen burial mounds, for 10 points each. A. Name these Japanese keyhole-shaped tumuli, primarily located near Osaka. These tumuli, which contain many clay haniwa figurines, give the name to the early Yamato period. That is Kofun. B. The tumuli at this site were first excavated shortly before World War II by the archaeologist Basil Brown. King Redwald, or else his son Eorpwald, is generally thought to have been buried at this site's Mound 1. That is Sutton Hoo. C. The ancient city of Cahokia, which contains the four-terraced Monk's Mound among its many tumuli, is located near East St. Louis along this river. This river also names the civilization to which Cahokia belonged. That answer is the Mississippi. Bonus 19. A universal covering problem named for this mathematician asks for the smallest convex shape that can cover a planar set of diameter 1, for 10 points each. Name this mathematician. An operation named for this mathematician is the subject of the monotone and dominated convergence theorems, and is often said to partition the range instead of the domain. That answer is Henri Lebesgue. B. Lebesgue names one of these functions that corresponds to length, area, and volume in 1, 2, or 3 dimensions, respectively. These countably additive functions map sets to non-negative real numbers. That is measure. C. Besides countable additivity, the other axiom of a measure is that it must assign 0 to this set. This set, which is typically notated using a circle with a slash through it, is a subset of any other set. That is empty set. Bonus 20. A book structured after this format uses the concept of beings of reason to address the perennial philosophical problem of how we can talk about non-existent entities like griffins, for 10 points each. A. Name this method that titles the magnum opus of Francisco Suarez. The Quodlibet and the Obligations were popular varieties of this medieval scholastic style of debate. That answer is Disputations. B. Francisco Suarez, Francisco de Vitoria, and other members of the school of Salamanca were influenced by this scholastic philosopher's treatment of topics like natural law in his Summa Theologica. That answer is Thomas Aquinas. C. Two-word English or Latin term required. Suarez and Vittoria considered factors like proportionality and likelihood of success in studying this topic of when conflict is morally permissible, which St. Augustine introduced. That answer is just war or jus bellum. That is the end of the packet.